Story number 1, Stillborn. During the baby shower, my sister Lisa gave me a big teddy bear, saying it was for my son when he's born. However, after the baby arrived, my husband seemed to change. He wasn't the same caring man I used to know. I remember countless nights when my baby cried, yet my husband never stirred to tend to him. Sometimes I'd let the baby cry a little longer, hoping my husband would wake, but he acted as though he didn't hear. I felt neglected after giving birth. It seemed like my husband no longer cared. Even if he didn't care about me anymore, I wished he would at least show some concern for our son. Instead, he spent most of his time playing poker online or watching TV. Although he didn't admit it, I knew he was having an affair. When he went to work, he seemed reluctant to return home. Initially, he provided money for our son's necessities, but eventually, he became reluctant to part with his earnings. When we ran out of baby formula or diapers, I had to beg him for money, and before giving it, he insisted I take pills from him first. I knew he was trying to harm me, but I took the pills anyway. If I died, at least our son would be cared for. I believed he wanted me dead so he could be with his affair partner. Despite telling my mom about his mistreatment, she always urged me to be patient. Sometimes, he'd return home drunk after outings with friends, leaving me alone to care for our son. His drinking escalated, and I'd often find him passed out in the living room at night, neglecting his duties. When our son fell ill, he refused to take him to the hospital, sparking an argument. He dismissed my concerns, prompting me to brandish a kitchen knife, demanding he promise to care for our son. In a moment of desperation, he grabbed our son by the leg and threw him out the window, shocking me to my core. He then uttered, "Stop pretending that teddy bear is our son." As I wept on the floor, he joined me, expressing regret for his actions and revealing that our baby had been stillborn. He apologized for neglecting me and offered antidepressant pills as his solution. Subsequently, we sought help, informing our doctor that the pills were causing hallucinations. With a new prescription, things improved slightly. With stability returning, I realized my excessive spending on the teddy bear had exacerbated the situation, a result of my depression. Years later, we conceived again, and I gave birth to a baby boy with brittle bones, diagnosed with osteogenesis imperfecta. Despite my disbelief in spirits or reincarnation, I understood that the teddy bear and my husband's actions were unrelated to our baby's condition. With proper care, exercise, and nutrition, our baby boy thrived, and we welcomed 2 more healthy children into our family. Story number 2, Mother Rat. When I was little, I always thought it was cute that my mother called my 8-year-old sister, Leah, Mauna. Mauna means mother rat in our language. My sister, Leah, was born handicapped. Her arms and legs are locked and stiffed. She can't move them. She's always in bed. The only part of her body that she can move was her neck. My mother would always say to me, "Go check and see if Mauna has pooped yet." I don't know why my mother would call Leah Mauna, but I think it was cute. My father, on the other hand, always called her by her real name, Leah. There are a few times when my mother and father would argue, and I would hear my mother say to my father, "It's because of you that Mauna was born that way." I never knew why. Whenever my mother said that, my father would just be quiet, and he couldn't answer her. I remember there were a few times my Uncle Lee would bring his kids to play with us. Sometimes we would play hide and seek in our house. I remember running to Mauna's room and hiding under the blanket next to her. She would smile and laugh a lot, and she would turn her head side to side. It seemed like Mauna wished she could play with us too. I would tell her not to tell anyone that I'm hiding under the blanket next to her. She would nod her head yes, like she understands. She can't talk, but she would make all kinds of noises like she's very happy. I think if she could talk, she would tell us that she wants to play too. But she can't talk, and she cannot move her body. Because Mao Na can't move, and she's always in one place all the time, she always has an infection of the lungs called pneumonia. She has already been to the hospital 4 times due to pneumonia. When Mao Na was 9 years old, she died of pneumonia. The last time she had pneumonia was really bad. She had a really high fever, and she was in a coma, and she died. I remember a month after she died, one day Uncle Lee and his kids came over again. This time my parents, with Uncle Lee and his wife, went to a wedding. So it was just us kids in the house. So we were playing hide and seek again. There were 6 of us, as my cousin Tommy was it. And as he was counting to 20, all of us kids were looking for a place to hide. I ran into Mao Na's room and ran into the closet to hide. Someone was already hiding in there with the blanket, so when I took the blanket off, I thought the girl under the blanket was Uncle Lee's daughter, Pang. It was dark, so I thought it was Pang. She was already hiding there, so I told her that I want to hide with her too. She nodded her head. Yes. I sat in the corner with her and we both covered our heads with the blanket. I heard Tommy come into the room, and then he said, "I know you're under the bed. I can see you." He probably looked under the bed and no one was there, so I heard him leave the room. After that, I told Pang that I'm going to go out to see where Tommy went. Pang just shook her head. I came out of the closet, I went to the living room, and Pang was already there, sitting on the sofa watching TV. That's when I froze and realized that the one in the closet wasn't Pang. Pang was the only girl that day. Confused, I went back to the closet and looked, but there was no one there. The blanket was there in the corner on the floor, but no one was there. I knew that was Mao Na. I was a little scared but also happy, at the same time that at last she gets to play hide and seek with us. When I'm older, I found out why my mother called my sister, Leah, Mao Na. Back in Thailand when my father was a young teenager, he liked to hunt birds and rats with his crossbow. One day after everyone went home at the flea market, my father went to hunt rats for fun there. He heard baby rats crying from the garbage area. Then my father went and moved the trash cans and saw a mother rat with 9 babies. The mother rat took off, but she came back, so my father grabbed the mother rat, and the mother rat bit his finger. So he slammed the mother rat onto the dirt, injuring her. My father pinned the mother rat's head down and used his little knife to cut the mother rat's hands and feet. The mother rat was still alive, but she can only sniffing with her nose and couldn't do anything else. My father brought the 9 baby rats home, but my grandparents yelled at him to throw them away. He took the baby rats to the river and threw them into the water. Now when I think about the name Mao Na, it's a very sad name. My sister only lived to be 9 years old. She couldn't move like the mother rat. My sister also died of pneumonia. It's an infection that causes fluids build up in your lungs and makes it difficult for you to breathe. You can drown in your own secretion. My father threw the 9 baby rats into the water and they all drowned. My sister Mao Na died at the age of 9 from fluids build up in her lungs. Story number 3, my mute brother. I recall when I was young, we resided in a 2-bedroom apartment. I shared a bed with my parents at that time. The other bedroom remained unoccupied, serving solely as storage space. I was the sole child then. During that era, dinosaur toys were all the rage among kids my age. My favorite was a green T-Rex toy. One day, I couldn't find my green T-Rex. I ventured into the other bedroom to search for it. While looking around, I witnessed my toy emerging from the closet, held by a little hand behind it. Peering inside, I discovered a boy who bore a striking resemblance to me. We played with my T-Rex together for a while. Later, I decided to retrieve all my toys from the living room for us to enjoy. I spent a considerable amount of time playing in that room each day. Whenever my parents came to check on me, it appeared as though they cannot see the boy in the room with me. Nevertheless, the boy was somewhat peculiar. He never uttered a word to me, relying instead on nods and shakes of his head to communicate. Around that time, my mom was pregnant. One night, I dreamt of being at a bus stop with the boy from my room. In the dream, he could speak. He informed me that he had to leave. I remained with him for a while, until a yellow bus arrived to pick him up. Following that dream, I never saw him again. A few days later, my mom began experiencing abdominal pain, prompting my father to rush her to the hospital. That night, my younger brother was born. My parents named him Kai. Since Kai was little, he couldn't speak. Even when he cried, his mouth would open, but no sound would emerge. Tears were visible, but his cries were silent. Kai is now 28 years old, yet he remains unable to speak, communicating instead through sign language. On one occasion, my Aunt Chia shared some background about my parents with me. Back in the old country of Laos, my parents had a son named Sa. Sa was merely 6 months old when they had to flee their village to escape communist soldiers. My parents and Aunt Chia were part of a group from the same village. However, due to Sa's incessant crying, the group insisted that my parents drug him, fearing that his cries would betray their hiding spot in the jungle. Refusing to harm their child, my parents were expelled from the group, who warned that they would return to kill my parents and Sa if they heard his cries. The jungle was thick, making it easy to become lost. Despite lagging behind the group, my parents and aunt persisted in following them. At sunset, Sa began to cry, prompting my parents to cover his mouth to avoid detection by the group. Shortly after, they heard gunshots ahead. Concealed among banana trees, they removed their hands from Sa's mouth, only to find him unresponsive. They had suffocated him unintentionally while trying to muffle his cries. Overwhelmed with grief, my dad laid Sa down and whispered, "Please be reborn as my son once again," before covering him with banana leaves. Following this tragedy, my parents rushed to rejoin the group, only to discover everyone dead from gunshot wounds upon their arrival. Even now, when I gaze at my younger brother Kai, I sense that he is the reincarnation of Sa. I believe that Kai is not my younger brother, but rather, my older brother. Perhaps his soul remains tormented by the fact that his cries were stifled, resulting in his birth without the ability to speak. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.